Welcome. If you are not new, then you already know what's going on here. And what's going on? We getting bigger and bigger. We getting better and better. And we, as I said, we are shitting on anybody and everybody who said we aren't who we are. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that this is the second episode to my 6 weeks, 36 episode live series. And today we're going to talk about, drum roll please. We're going to talk about 2022 through 2023, just the foundational era of my career. Um, so I'm going to give y'all a little pretense. Um, this right here is the narrative. This is the narrative. This is me laying my story out there one by one by one, convenience by convenience by convenience. So, I started making music in 2020. Um, the reason how I started making music is because I had a friend who was friends with a group of people. That's what I'll say. I had a friend who was friends with a group of people, and these group of people were people who made music. Okay. And in hindsight, the friend that I had, who was connected to this group of people, one of the, like, I guess you could say the main person from that group of people asked them to be on a song. And they were like, no, they were like, no, I'm not doing it. So I was like, you know what? I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll get it done. So I did it. That's how it started. And I'm not going to say the artist's name or who the person was, but yeah. So the date was July 17th. There was a day, July 17th, 2020 was the first day I released this song. And I was on somebody else's record. So I didn't release any singles. I didn't do anything like that. I didn't know anything about anything for real. I didn't know how to get on Apple Music or anything like that. So I started doing some research. I started uploading my songs on Spotify. This is all throughout like August through like September of 2022. So the friend that I was telling you about earlier, we were making music on BandLab, and like at the time I didn't know how to use BandLab. I didn't know how to record anything. I didn't know how to do. I didn't know how to do any of that. So the friend that I had at that time, he would hold the phone for me and press the button while I would record the songs or whatever. So I was putting the music on Spotify, putting the music on SoundCloud. October of 2020 rolled around. I dropped my first album, and I was on Apple Music and Spotify. I felt very good. Like, I'm not gonna lie, when I dropped my first album, even though I didn't know anything about budgeting or anything like that, I was like, okay, yeah, like, it's out. It's great. This is good. So, I had a couple features on there. It's crazy because back at that time when life was less official, I had more people around me to do certain things. Now that it's more official, it's like I'm doing everything on my own. I like it like this though. It's cool. I know it's for a reason. So 2021 rolls around. I dropped my second album, which was called Genesis. I dropped the deluxe. 2021 was like I don't know. 2021 was like a type of time. 2022 rolled around, and I'm not gonna lie, I was eating them up like they ate on my D, like I said, and bigger. Okay, so 2022 rolled around. I dropped 4 albums and a TV show. The end of 2021, I got all my friends in the hood. I was like, I want to put out a TV show. And I basically put all my friends, every friend that I knew, every friend that I had, I put them in that TV show. So that came out in 2022. I'm not gonna lie, that TV show from my like in my neighborhood where I'm from, it was like a cultural reset. I had hood niggas saying they were actors now. I had people from my hood, like, now they want to be in TV shows. Like, I'm really the culture, Loki. I'm really the culture, but that's for another day. So that's 2022. 4 albums. I dropped. I did a lot of different things. I think in 2022, it's like a lot of things throughout the course of my career have like happened. I'm not gonna try to say spiritually, but it's like sometimes when I couldn't get something else to work, something else worked out and opened the door for something completely different for me. So it's weird. Like, I remember one time in 2021 where I couldn't release albums through DistroKid. I don't know what happened, and I started, like, putting them on YouTube. And if I hadn't started that then in 2021, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So I just think like that's pretty cool. So 2023 rolled around. I moved into my first apartment. I was 22 years old. I was on my seventh rap mixtape at this point. So, you know, um, I just moved to this. I don't even know if y'all are familiar with this place, but it's called Gaffney, South Carolina. I had just moved to Gaffney. I just moved to Gaffney. I got my first place or whatever, and I'm living it good. I'm doing it big. But at that point, I'm not gonna lie. Once 2023 came around, like I told y'all earlier, it's like I didn't have money in 2021. I had a little budget, a little something, something. But it's like when I started to get the money, things just started to like, it's like the timing wasn't adding up anymore for me to record how I was recording before. So, I moved to my first apartment. I ended up recording my first, my last rap album, which is still out. It's called Frenzy. In 2023, I put that out. So at the end of 2023, uh, no, we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm not gonna go that fast. So yeah, so that's essentially what 2020 to 2023 was about. The first 7 rap mixtapes. And one thing I can say, if I'm being honest, like as I was dropping those mixtapes and stuff, I was wondering like, am I doing too much? Because if I would have kept those albums out and still been working how I was now, I would have like 13 albums out already, and I'm not even mainstream yet. That's just too much. That's too much. 13 albums and I'm not mainstream. I might, so so I deleted those, and I just rebuilt myself. Um, so yeah, 2020 to 2023 was a great foundational period. It's like I was making art, but in such a childlike way. It's like by that I mean like it was no pressure, it was no masters, it was no royalties, it was no business. It was just me making the art, putting it on DistroKid, and getting my little, royalty check. You know what I mean? It wasn't a time of just like me being, the CEO boss that I am now, as far as me handling masters, publishing, deals, sync licensing, just all those different type of things that I was resistant to know before. Um, but I'm not gonna lie, one of the highlights of the 2020 to 2023 period was my TV show. Me writing the TV show, literally the only thing I didn't do by myself was film the different angles. So, when you're doing a TV show, you have different angles and you have different cameramen for the different angles. That's the only thing I didn't do by myself. So I filmed it. I edited it. I wrote it. I did everything by myself. And it was such an experience to see me be the leader that I am, and really, because the thing about it is this, like, you can be a leader, but my friends, they didn't have to listen to me. I didn't pay them to be in the TV show. They just did it because they wanted to do it, and they did it. So it was just an amazing experience, if I'm being honest with you. It was amazing to see, like, for one, people, they believe in my vision. They support my dream, and they respect me. They listen to me, they when I say, hey, it's like, because I mean, I know it has to be something, because nobody who doesn't care about what you're doing is going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning for call times. Nobody who doesn't care about what you're doing is going to make sure they're there to film a independent movie or independent operation. So I can say whatever I would have wanted to say, but I know those people had that believed in me and cared about me at that time, because they showed up. So that was one of the biggest highlights of, just that time in my life, and for me to be so early. I think, how old was I? I was 20 years old, when I put out my first TV show, my first directed TV show. And just to give y'all, some little behind the scenes on that, I knew, once we filmed that first episode, for those of you, the lions in the den, like Blakis, Jacoby, all of my lions who were in the den when I first released the TV show, the part where the character Tiana found her sister dead, I knew once we got to that, I was like, yeah, this is going to be good. This is going to be good. It's something about me, and I'm not going to lie, like, and I love it. I can make something out of nothing. Like, and at that time I had nothing, but I was like, I was just being so freaking creative. Like, and listen, I don't think y'all understand, like, people sit around in life, and they complain. You know what I mean? They complain, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. But it's like, no, you can. And I'm a living witness. I'm a living witness that if you put your mind to something, it doesn't matter the budget that you have. I don't, when I talk about my past, things like 2023 and 2020, I'm not saying I didn't have a budget for sympathy. I'm saying I didn't have a budget because I still made a way. And certain people sit up here and make excuses every day for simple things in life. But hey, if you really want something, you're going to make a way. And I think that time of my life and my career was a time where I didn't have anything, but I still was eating them up. I still was eating them up. I still had people from my hood, and I've grown past this now, but, people from my hood, they're actors, they're singers, they're doing all this stuff because of Mason Jyree, because they sat back and watched me, you know? So that was just one of the biggest highlights of just that moment, Um, and I'm not gonna lie, when I got to, creating that last rap mixtape, Frenzy, I was exploring myself, I was feeling really, really, really good, Um, if I'm being honest, before I really became comfortable with my sexuality, I was out here faking straight, you know. I was out here faking straight, you know what I mean? And I faked straight a lot in my early music. I faked straight a lot in that 2020 to 2023 era. You know, but when around 2023, right when I moved into my first place, I just started to let, little, you know what I'm saying, let it be out a little bit more, you know what I mean? Because 10 toes out, when I step on the jet, I see why they hate being me as a flex. Body on 12, now I know I'm the best. So that frenzy era was just really about me just exploring and tapping into myself. One thing about me, I've never been rigid, and I knew I wasn't going to come on here and fake straight for too long. I was never going to come on here and fake straight for too long. That just isn't in me. It just never was in me. So I'm glad that I made that pivot. I'm glad that I made that pivot because honestly, but you want to know, for 2023, I did ask myself, like, I didn't want to be known as a gay artist. Like, I didn't want to be having to be on stage talking about sucking and all that, all that stuff. I didn't want to have to do that. So I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I kept evolving. I'm glad because I don't want to be labeled as gay and a gay artist. Like, I'm an artist. I just happen to be gay. Sorry. I'm an artist, just happens to be gay. So I just think that's very, very important. 2020 to 2023 was about me evolving. It was about me evolving into, different sounds. Another thing that I want to talk about, I went through like 2 or 3 different names. 3, the first name was Mason the Slayer. You can Google it. All this stuff that I'm saying, you can Google, you can fact check it. As far as my songwriting credits, so it was Mason the Slayer, then the Slayer, then Jocelyn, and now here we are, Mason Jyree, and that's the final. So I just, like I was saying earlier, these episodes are about narrative, about me getting my narrative out there and everything like that. And if I'm being honest, it really wasn't, it really wasn't meant, because I'm gonna keep it real. I did start making music, and I didn't realize this until later, but I did start making music in the 2020 wave of people making music, and I saw all those people blowing up, and I was like, when am I gonna blow up? When am I gonna blow up? But I don't think that it was meant for me to blow up at that time just yet, because I still, like, looking back on it, I still had certain things that I had to learn. Like, even when it comes down to just my name changes, my sense of person, who I am, like, I had to go through those certain things. Success for me is gonna happen regardless, but it's like I had to learn certain things for real. Like, I had to learn certain, like, for instance, how we talk to y'all about certain things like masters, royalties, publishing. I didn't know anything about ASCAP in 2020. And it's crazy because I know my story is a destined story, because in 2021 I met this guy at this job I had, and he was telling me about ASCAP, but I didn't know what he was talking about. He was telling me, like, you need to register your music with ASCAP, but I didn't know what he was talking about. Now, 2 years later, I found out what it was, and it's like, wow, he was trying to tell me that earlier. But the point of the matter is that everything from those years was meant to happen methodically, if that's the word. It was meant to happen in a story. However, the story was unbeknownst to me. Like, when you're in life, I'm not going to know how it's going to play out. I just know that it's playing out, if you get my drift. So, that's pretty much just that. It's pretty much really just that. Everything is meant to happen methodically. Everything was meant to happen how it's happened, essentially. Um, so, I gave y'all yesterday the who is Mason Jyree. Who is Mason Jyree. Today I talked, about, just 2020 to 2023. Tomorrow we're gonna get into 2024 to 2020, 2024. We're going to talk about 2024 tomorrow, the love era, the love era. Episode 4 will be about 2025 until now, and episode 5, we're getting into some, some pretty deeper things. You want to know what I mean? But listen, tomorrow I'll be on here 8:30, not 10:30 in the morning. Tomorrow I'll be on here 8:30 p.m. 8:30 p.m. So Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Friday, Saturday, 10 p.m. So Monday, Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 p.m. and Friday, Saturday, 10 p.m. Okay. So yeah, it's crazy to think back on that time, because 2020 to 2023 is only 3 years, but I did so much. I mean, I dropped 7 rap mixtapes. I dropped 7 rap mixtapes in that time. That's a lot. That's a lot. And And you can fact check this, it's fact checkable. But my first album was called Alpha. The second album was called Genesis. Then I had the Genesis Deluxe, and then I had who was that 2020? What was that early album that came on my TV show dropped in 2022? Exodus. It was called Exodus. Yep, it was called Exodus. It was called Exodus. That was my fourth album. And then I dropped another album in 2022 that summer. And then I dropped MDS6, and then I dropped Frenzy. So those it was just a time of just me really working creatively. The first time, like I told you earlier on the live, that friend I had who was pressing the button on BandLab for me, we would make music in my 2001 Honda Civic in my front yard. So like, yeah, I'm not gonna lie. At first, I even go back on my BandLab and I see like his name still, attached to some of those things. And it's like, even though I don't deal with him anymore, I'm still appreciative for those moments, because it's like I always give people what props is due. And he was there, in the first beginning part of my career, pressing that button for me, making sure, because I didn't know how to do any of that. So, I really appreciate him for moments like that, and I appreciate my humble beginnings. I'm not gonna lie, like I really do. It's humble beginnings are such a fun time. Like, it's just such a fun time when you ain't got all the pressure on the world to worry about, all the masses, the public, just everything, the business side of it. When you just really focusing on the art and it's just new, such a fun time. It's such a fun time. I'm not gonna lie, and I wouldn't trade those moments for the world. Now, in hindsight, I thought I would have blew up sooner. I thought, but like I told y'all a few minutes ago, I think it was all meant to work out how it's working out, because I'm not just an artist. I'm a CEO. I'm a director. You know what I mean? I'm multi hyphenate. I'm that guy. I'm Mason Jyree. I'm Mason Jyree, and I think that it was meant for me to develop all these different it was meant for me to develop these different parts of my creativity, because I'm not just a one trick artist. I don't just blow up through artistry. I blow up through me being myself, and this is just me going back and looking off my career, because, yeah, just me looking back at my career. I'm not just a one trick pony, I'm good in a lot of different things, as far as creativity. So, as time goes on, y'all are gonna get albums from me, but you may see me direct a couple movies. You may see me, just that's what I do, and that's what I've been doing, And I think that was the foundational era of 2020 to 2023, which is more so about me allowing, because that's what creativity is, y'all. When if you're a painter, you sit at home and you paint. That's your inner child coming out. So my first raps and all those different type of things that I was doing, that was literally like my inner child just going rampant. And I think to me now it's like me being the parent to my inner child, guiding me to success, So those are fundamental moments that I would not change for the world. I really appreciate those first couple albums. And even, you have moments where as an artist, you meet people who really don't, I've met a couple rivals before. I've met a couple rivals, people who I fell out with, people who I've had on my songs I'm not cool with anymore. But even all those things they were like baby, what is it? Daycare. They were like elementary school. I'm about to get a college degree, literally, physically, and spiritually. I'm about to graduate college. So, the rivalries and the beef the quote unquote beef, it's so cute, because it's like, come on now, it was never any beef for real. It was never any beef for real. So, the quote unquote beef and stuff, with people and stuff like that. I just look back on those fundamental phases of my artistry, and it's like yeah, like it makes sense. It makes sense to me anyway, and that's all that matters. What matters is that it makes sense to me. So yeah. Y'all have to make sure that y'all tune in tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. Remember, Monday and Tuesday are 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Friday, Saturday, 10 p.m. for this 6-day, 6 weeks live special that we have going on. Remember, tomorrow we're going to talk about 2024, which was the love era for me. Then we're going to episode 5 is 2025 through the present, and then episode 5, we're switching it up. So episode tomorrow, 2024, the love era. The fourth episode, 2025, to the present moment right now. The fifth episode, we're getting into some juicy things. And by the end of this, I pray and hope that I have become comfortable and vulnerable with y'all, opening up about some of my most deeper secrets and some of the most, craziest things that I have been through in my life. Yeah, like I'm excited. Like I told you yesterday, I'm ready to get that off my chest. I'm not gonna lie, I'm ready to get that off my chest, baby. I feel like once I get that off my chest, a weight is going to be lifted up off of me. I'm gonna be able to open, myself up to just so many different possibilities. Because I'm not the only person going through certain things in life just because of my status, just because of my celebrity. I'm not the only person that's going through certain things in life because I'm still a human. So like, yeah, you know what I mean. So once I open up about those vulnerable things that I and own myself for real, by the end of this 36 episode series, I'm gonna be closer with myself, closer with my fans, closer. Just we're gonna be close, and I'm gonna be real about everything in regards to myself, and I'm gonna own up to it and just live in it, because that's what that's it. Like that's it. And I tell you all the time, the stuff that sounds corny and cliche is always the stuff that's true. It takes a strong, bold person to live in their truth. You know what I mean? It takes a strong individual to live in their truth. And it's like I'm telling myself that, and nobody's gonna, like, yeah, like just, yeah, gotta own up to that. So that's what this series is about. Listen, Lions, make sure that you are here tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. 8:30 p.m. sharp. We're gonna talk about the 2024 love era for me. The next episode is 2025 to the present moment, and then we're gonna get into some juicy stuff. And by the end of this 13 episodes, we're eating them up like they ate on our D. Make sure you're streaming bigger. Make sure you get into Ain't No Lover Boy FR. Make sure you're getting into me, because listen, it's your boy Mason Jyree. And if you're new to the Lions, then welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are not new, then you already know what's going on here. And what's going on, we getting bigger and bigger. We getting better and better. And we are shitting on anybody and everybody who said we aren't who we are. Once again, it's your boy Mason Jyree. I love you. Abontoir.